We will continue today with our presentation about Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love. We will talk about the challenges of the family, the experiences and challenges of the family. Today, the family faces new challenges that we must answer. For me, chapter 2 of Amoris Laetitia is a brilliant analysis of the complexity of the problems that we face. Pope Francis not only writes about what he has seen of families, but he also refers to the testimony of the bishops in different parts of the world. So you can see a very wide perspective. He presents a very good synthesis of various challenges. These challenges include cultural decline that fails to promote love, a society that makes harder for people to get married, the lack of maturity in young adults, and the problem of loneliness. He also addresses other situations that are affecting family, like housing, migration, families with children with special needs, and the loneliness of the elderly. The situation of the family now is very different from that of our parents and grandparents. Let's talk about, for example, the family in New Zealand. Now there are fewer marriages. In 2009, the marriage rate was 30.5 marriages per 1,000. 1,000 estimated non-married population aged 16 years old and over. In 1971, it was 45.5 marriages per 1,000. Now is in 2009, 13.5. So this generation is more likely to be unpartnered or to partner later. In 2006, 28% of people aged 24 to 34 had never married or entered a civil union, and 34% were unpartnered. The advancements of the rights of the women have changed the continence of the family. Women and men are now both participating in the development of the society, and this has generated new challenges that we have to face. Every day it becomes more difficult for families to balance family life and work demands. In many societies, I'm not talking of New Zealand, but in many societies like Latin America, for example, we don't see enough men helping women in the house. For example, I lived in Mexico for 3 years. I created a program called Reciprocity to help indigenous women to understand their own value and dignity. In these Mexican towns, women were expected to not only take part in the agricultural work, but also be responsible for the household food and taking care of children, with little or no participation of men. When I asked them, they answered, men are superior to us, and love means that we need to make them happy. So I will show you a little video that we film about this project so you can understand a little bit other type of problems about families that you don't see in New Zealand, and I think it can help us to understand why the Pope has all these perspectives so varied and different. It's because there are so many different problems that have to be faced in a different way. Thank you. The Pope also addresses how the phenomenon of poverty is affecting family life. I think there is a close relation between family and poverty. We cannot work for the family if we don't work against poverty. In New Zealand, single parents families make up 28% of all families with dependent children. These families are the poorest in New Zealand. Child poverty is consistently blamed on unemployment, low wages, high housing costs, and inadequate social security benefits. Little attention has been given to family structure. Despite marriage being the best protector against child poverty, it has become politically and fashion. and fashionable. Some argue intensively to express such a view. But if there is to be any political will to solve child poverty, the issue has to be confronted. We have to invest politically also in the family as a structure, as a body that has to be defended and helped and supported by the state, by the society. The dominant liberal ideology of our Western societies does not value community life. Today, neighbors hardly know each other. There is little time for friendship and companionship. A consumeristic society values people for the price of their work. So sometimes we denounce that we lack family values, but I think sometimes we participate in this consumeristic society, not taking care of the poor people, living in our own aisle without solidarity towards the vulnerable ones. So, if we think that we want to defend family, we have to work for the poorest and against the poverty. Then we will pass to the next chapter of the document, in which the Pope talks about marriage and family in the Bible. In number 8, we read, "The Bible is full of families, births, love stories, and family crises. This is true from its very first page, with the appearance of Adam and Eve's family, with all its burden of violence, but also its enduring strength, to its very last page, where we behold the wedding feast of the bride and the lamb." Pope Francis doesn't use the scriptures as a dogmatic or normative source. Really, it touched me how he used the Bible in this document. It is a narrated experience of faith. It is a narrated story to inspire us. Pope Francis wants to search the narrative and the language of love. He finds that the logic, the original narrative of love is in the Bible. We find this narrative of love in the biblical level. And it is a dramatic story with light and shadows. It's interesting. The Bible doesn't tell stories doesn't talk about dogmas or truths about family. It narrates different stories of families. So all of us are included in the narrative. The gospel doesn't present an ideal view of the family, but the reality of the family with all its complexity. That is why I think that the Pope wants to approach to the Bible and see how the Bible can be a companion in our journey. In this, we can see, for example, in number 21, Jesus himself was born into a modest family that soon had to flee to a foreign land. So, one family, Jesus' family that needed to be refugees. He visits the home of Peter, whose mother-in-law is ill, and shows sympathy upon hearing of deaths in the homes of Jairus and Lazarus. So the Pope again is telling us about the experiences of families, of death and funerals, and the tragedy of loss and the grief that all of us we have to do. He continues, he hears the desperate wailing of the widow of 9 for her dead son, and heeds the plea of the father of an epileptic child in a small country town. He goes to the homes of tax collectors like Matthew and Zacchaeus, and speaks to sinners like the woman in the house of Simon the Pharisee. Jesus knows the anxieties and tensions experienced by families, and he weaves them into his parables. Children who leave home to seek adventure, the prodigal son, or who prove troublesome, or fall prey to violence. He is also sensitive to the embarrassment caused by the lack of wine at a wedding feast, the failure of guests to come to a banquet, and the anxiety of a poor family over the loss of a coin. In a very sharp and wise interpretation of the scriptures, he finds the core of the gospel. I think this number 22 is very nice. In this brief review, we can see that the Word of God is not a series of abstract ideas, but rather a source of comfort and companionship for every family that experiences difficulties or suffering. For it shows them the goal of their journey, when God's will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more. Thank you very much, and we will continue with the next one.